Welcome. Glad that you guys are here. We're going to be finishing up this study in the book of Ruth. And so hopefully you have kept up with your notes. Hopefully you kind of look back over this in the coming weeks and days, and maybe you can kind of see some of the story kind of unveil in a new way, in a new light as you maybe look back through your notes. And if you missed a week, if you missed some of the notes, anything that there might be a gap for you, all of the resources are available on our website, indianlandcc.com/download, and you can access the videos, you can access the sermon notes, and the discussion questions on there. So if there's anything that you're missing, please, I encourage you to jump on there and grab that. I want to mention too, to remind you guys to bring your white folders, your notebooks. You can use those, one, as something to bear down on as you're taking notes. But then also, when we're done, hopefully I remember every week to use the hole punch paper, and you can actually insert those into your folders and kind of help keep things nice and neat. But again, thank you for being here. We're going to jump into this last week, and before we really dig into some things, we've seen how the story has unfolded. We've seen, how God uses our circumstances sometimes as an invitation into something new, into something different, into something extraordinary that He's doing. If we see what's going on in our circumstances as a punishment or as a curse, then maybe it's an invitation to repent and to step into a path that He is actually outlining for us. If we see it as a blessing, maybe it's an invitation to be a blessing to others, to be generous, to speak encouragement into other folks. And so in all of this, when we get through this, the thing that we kind of look at is we recognize that we know who God is, right? And that was last week. We talked about starting from what we know. And if we know who God is and we have an understanding and a relationship with Him, then most likely He's kind of guiding us into some action steps, right? He's pointing out some things that we need to go do to be part of His extraordinary plan. And so He's allowing us as ordinary people, right, as ordinary folks, to step into the extraordinary work that He's doing in the world. And my prayer today for us is that as we continue to process this last chapter, as we go through this, my prayer is that God will continue to open up our hearts and minds and show us something that is not only something that gives us knowledge, something that gives us insight as to who He is, but also gives us something that we can walk away with that tomorrow and this weekend and next week and next year we can use in our lives to better represent Him and to better represent His message of love and reconciliation to those around us. And so before we dig in today, I do have a question for us. And it's kind of funny that before we got things started today, Tammy kind of mentioned having an email with a potential coupon or some kind of marketing thing on her phone. And my question to you today is how many of you actually read the fine print before you make a decision? All right? How many of you read the fine print? You look at, you see the big thing, right? And this week, Wednesday, you're going to have like all the big print and all the fine print that you can deal with. It's a bad copy, but this is just a thing that I kind of grabbed. This is what you're going to be seeing this week, right? This kind of craziness, and you'll see under that video game console there that free Target gift card when you spend $329.99, and then the little thing that's beside it, you can't even make it out. You can't even make it out because it's so small. It's that fine print. You got this huge tons of savings opportunities. Tons of saving opportunities. You got 75% off. Lowest prices of the season. Black Friday sales. Like that's just going to bombard us, right? Black Friday sales starting noon on Thursday. Somebody in the marketing department has got their days confused, right? It's like, they're different days. Anyway. But you see these things. You see this huge print, and then you find the fine print, right? And they're talking about these huge discounts, these never before seen low prices. And then you get into the fine print and you break out your magnifying glass and you have that with your reading glasses, and then you got somebody holding the light just right so you can see exactly what they're saying. And all of a sudden you realize that what they're saying is everything is on sale except for this list of things that is not applicable, right? The fine print, it excludes all the stuff that we really want, right? It excludes all the stuff that we would really go in there going, hey, it's finally on sale. But no, it's not really actually on sale, because you get up there, and if you didn't read it before you got up there, you go and you go to checkout and they scan it and you hand your coupon over and they're like, oh, this does not work on this item. What do you mean? It says on everything, yeah, except for those, like, here's your magnifying glass. Like, it excludes so many things. Or maybe it is something. I remember when GPS, you remember? Before you had your phone, before Waze, like they had the box, that would go on your windshield. And I remember when those things came out, and they were like stupid expensive. And Heather used to work for Target, and so they put those things on Black Friday. And it was great. Like, you got there and you stood in line, and the line was wrapped around the building, and they were awesome because they were serving coffee and stuff. And it was, it was kind of this kind of built up. It's like, hey, what are you going to get? And I never will forget. It's like after we had Clara, I was standing in line and I was talking to this guy, and he's like, so why are you here? I'm like, well, I'm here to get diapers, because we ran out of diapers, and my wife works here, and I was already up, so I just figured I'd come on out here and just kind of see what kind of craziness was going on. Well, the GPS systems were on sale that week, and on this Black Friday, and I got in there, and I went, of course, everybody like runs to all the good stuff, and I'm like the only person, literally the only person over in diapers. Grab my box of diapers. I got the like we had triplets, got the big box of diapers. Go over, I'm like, well, GPS stuff is it's not too crazy around the electronics. I'll just go over there. Lo and behold, I get next to this dude who I was talking to outside the building. And he's like, I thought you were just coming in for diapers. I'm like, got him. I'm done, I'm finished. All the rest of this time I'm just going to spin and see what happens, right? And so I'm standing there in line, and lo and behold, I actually end up getting a GPS. And so it was kind of crazy. And then I circled back around, I kind of checked out everything else, and I got back over there, all the GPS things were going, right? And so usually in that fine print, it's like GPS systems, like $10. Like they weren't that cheap, but it was something crazy. And it's like, while supplies last, right? It was just this little tiny print. And it's like, so this lady, as I circle back around, she was giving that person, she was going down the road. You advertise this, you're out. It's like, yeah, well, there are no rain checks. Like, she was wanting a rain check. Sorry, we can't really, this was a one-time, whatever. So anyway, point is, the fine print, right? We got the large print that giveth, and the fine print that taketh away. The fine print is the thing that goes and says, no, not this. It's the exclusions. It's everything that we can't have. But the large print is like, hey, y'all come on over here. We got something great for you today. Another thing, just kind of in processing through this, there's some other things that you kind of run across from time to time. I don't know about you guys, but every now and then, it seems like about once a quarter, we get this postcard in the mail. And it's like, deal of a lifetime. And there's like this beautiful picture. There's like woods off in the distance, and there's just a crystal clear lake. And it's like, for $25,000, you can own 5 acres of lakefront property. Sounds like a great deal. Especially if you're used to real estate prices around here, right? $25,000 and you got 5 acres, lakefront, beautiful. Get in early. The problem is, with that, is that you can only access those 5 acres by boat or by hiking a couple of miles into the woods, right? And once you get there, there's no utilities around. They haven't developed anything else, so there's nothing else there. So you go and you shell out your $25,000, and basically what you've invested in is your own private primitive camping space, which is great, if you have a boat to get you there, or you feel like hiking through the woods and then just kind of being there without anything or anybody else around you, which some of us may really love that, but for guys like me, my idea of camping is in a camper connected to electricity with a grocery store within a couple miles drive, right? So let's just be honest. Let's be honest with all this stuff. But anyway, point being, as we kind of head into this week and as we start thinking about things, we're going to see all this large print, all this big stuff that we can go and we gain access to. And I know personally, like I love sale shopping. Now my wife is amazing at it. Like she can go in and she can come out with like a $3,000 outfit for like $50. It's crazy. Like, and it's not just an outfit. Like she comes out and she's got like a month worth of stuff, and I'm like, how did you do that? Because every time I go in, when it's on sale, they don't have the big boy clothes. They only have, like the fifth graders. You know what I'm saying? So anyway. But we start seeing these things, and we're always looking for a good deal, right? We're always looking for a bargain. We're always looking for something that we can pick up, something that we can grab, something that's good for us, that doesn't cost us much of anything, right? We're always wanting to get something in exchange for next to nothing. We want to gain something of great value and only give a little or nothing in exchange. And in our ordinary, we find that the large print gives and the fine print takes away. In our ordinary, we only want the large print. Right? We only want the stuff that is in the large print. We only want to have the upside. We only want to have the gain. And we don't really want to shell out anything in exchange for it, right? Or we want to limit how much we give in exchange for it. And today, as we dive into this last chapter of Ruth, we're going to see that we're not the only ones that think like this. This is not exclusive to us or our generation or this culture. We'll see that an extraordinary God at work, and He's utilizing ordinary people to accomplish remarkable things. And today, we see an example of the biblical fine print. We see the large print, and we're going to see that fine print. But it may not be kind of what you're thinking. It's not related to articles of clothing or electronics or these other things, but we're going to see an example of large print and fine print. So the last time we were together, Naomi kind of came to life. She started what she knew about God. She knew about His provision. And so she knew about His law. And so she started with what she could do. And what she could do was coach Ruth, right? So she trained Ruth. She talked to her. Hey, go pretty yourself up. Do this, do this. She gave her instructions on how to approach Boaz. And the whole purpose of her approaching Boaz was to approach him as the family redeemer. And essentially, this would be like our modern day proposal, right? So she coaches her. She tells her everything that she needs to do to go in and propose marriage to Boaz. So we watch this whole process kind of unfold. And Boaz is there, and he receives Ruth. And and Boaz starts with what he knows, right? He knows why she's there after they get into this conversation. He knows what's going on. And he knows the provision that God has for His people. He understands what it all looks like. He understands this whole concept of family redeemer. And then he does what he knows to do. He says, hey Ruth, I get it. I will be your family redeemer. But I know that there's another one who's closer. There's one who's in line ahead of me. And in order for us to do this the right way, I need to go find that guy, share this information with him, and then we'll give him the chance to redeem you. And what Boaz does is really cool, because he says, if he doesn't step in to redeem you, then I will. If he doesn't fulfill his obligation as the family redeemer, you have my word, I will step in and do it. I will step in and do it. So Ruth goes back to Naomi. She fills her in on the whole detail. And of course, Naomi says, all right, my dear, now we wait. And that is the cliffhanger that we left on last week. Now we're waiting. We're waiting. What is going to happen? What is the next step? And so that's where we're going to pick up here today. And you have in your notes this first section of the passage, and it says, Boaz went to the gate of the town and he sat down there. Again, Boaz is waiting. All right, he goes to the gate and he sat down. And soon, the family redeemer Boaz had spoken about came by. And Boaz said, "Come over here and sit down." So he went over and he sat down. Then Boaz took 10 men of the town's elders and said, "Sit here." And they sat down. And he said to the redeemer, "Naomi, who has returned from the territory of Moab, is selling the portion of the field that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should inform you. Buy it back in the presence of those seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people, and if you want to redeem it, do it. But if you do not want to redeem it, tell me so that I know, because there isn't anyone other than you to redeem it, and I am next after you. I want to redeem it," the man said. So Boaz is at the gate of the town, right? Boaz is there, he's hanging out. And because of what we know happens in Ruth chapter 3, he has to go and find this closer family redeemer. And so he goes to the gate of the town. And it's important for us to recognize that the gate of the town is significant in this. Because the gate of the town, this is where important people went to debate important topics of the day, right? So you go to the gate of the town and you'd often find people who were discussing all kind of business. They would be debating what's going on in the town. They would be talking about what's going on in the community. Poor people would gather there. They would, they'd have whatever containers they had begging for food or for handouts. The gate of the town was the most heavily populated or most traveled section because it was the way in and the way out. And so Boaz goes there, and he knew who this other redeemer was. He probably knew where the guy lived, but he knew that it wasn't close enough for him to get there, so he knew that the guy would be coming into town. So he goes to the gate, and he's hanging out at the gate. He's hanging out. And he sees him. Hey, come over here and sit down. And so the guy comes over and he sits down, and Boaz knew that he was going to present this information that would be a legal matter, right? And so you notice, okay, he called some other folks around, like he called the other elders of the community around. And see, what was going on is Boaz knew, again, he knew the law. He knew what was required. And so in order for there to be a transaction like he was about to present, for the family redeemer to step in, he knew that he had to have witnesses. He had to have elders around to witness what was going to happen. Boaz knew he was going to present information that would be of a legal matter, and he understood what was required for that conversation to take place. And then Boaz started with the large print. Boaz started with the large print. He started with the upside. He started with God's law and provision for the family. And here's an opportunity for you to step in and redeem our family land, to redeem what could potentially fall away from us. He starts with this. He goes to the Redeemer, the family Redeemer, and he says, here's an opportunity for you to do what God's law has made a provision for us to do. Here's a chance for you to step out of your ordinary and step into God's extraordinary, because He has made a way for this to happen. And now I've come here to meet you, and I've got the elders here, and I've got you here, and I know what we need to talk about. And Boaz gave him the big picture. He gave him a recap of everything that happened. Boaz said, hey, here's Naomi. She came back. She left with Elimelech, who is our brother. This is the relation. She came back, and now she wants to sell Elimelech's land, the family land. She wants to give it over to the family redeemer. And of course, the family redeemer, at the last of that passage, he said, I am interested. I want to redeem the land. I want to do it. I understand the provision. I understand the law. And hey, I'm here, and you got the people here. Let's go ahead and move forward with this deal. I want to do it. I want to redeem the land. Now, before we move on, and you have this little blank on your notes there, and this is going to become an important part of our story here in just a second, but I want to point out to you that in the Hebrew, in the original language, in the original telling of this story, the closer redeemer would have been referred to as Mr. So-and-so. Mr. So-and-so. That's how we know him. The identity of the closer family redeemer is Mr. So-and-so. Which is funny because we know about Elimelech, we know about Naomi, we know about Chilion, we know about Mahlon, we know about Ruth, we know about Orpah, we know about Boaz. We get introduced to all these different characters. And why do we need to know about Orpah? I mean, she doesn't even come, right? But we know her name. I find that really interesting. And yet here is the closer family redeemer that is only identified as a closer family redeemer in our translation. But originally he was just called Mr. So-and-so. Oh, nobody. He's a nobody. Mr. So-and-so. Who is this mystery man? Why is it interesting that we don't know his name? Why is it interesting that maybe we should know his name? Hopefully we'll answer that question here in a few minutes. Boaz continues, and we're picking back up on your notes here what you have in the passage. Then Boaz said, "On the day that you buy the field from Naomi, you will acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the deceased man, to perpetuate the man's name on his property." And the Redeemer replied, "Now, Mr. So-and-so," he said, "I can't redeem it myself, or I will ruin my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption, because I can't redeem it." I can't redeem it. So Mr. So-and-so gets presented the large print, right? Here is an opportunity of your lifetime. You can step into God's provision and God's law, and you can redeem this land, and you can save this family. And Mr. So-and-so is all into it until the fine print comes in. Until Boaz says, "On the day that you buy the field back from Naomi, you will acquire Ruth." Boaz is like, great. You want to step in, you want to do the right thing, you want to redeem the family property. This is such good news. And he says, wait, there's more. There's something else you need to know. Boaz outlines the fine print. He outlines the fine print. The large print was giving Mr. So-and-so the family land. It was giving him assets. It was giving him something to even build up his own name, right? Because in that verse it says you got to take on this land and give her a child so that you can perpetuate his name, so you can have his name live on. And see, if Mr. So-and-so had just taken on the land, and if Elimelech and Naomi, if they'd had sons who died, but they'd never married, then in this transaction, then Mr. So-and-so would have taken on Naomi. And because she was probably later in life and not likely to bear more children, Mr. So-and-so was thinking, okay, I'm going to get Naomi. That's great. She's not going to give us any more kids. My family, my name will be attached now to this land. The fine print meant now that he had the added expense of a wife that was of childbearing age, that he would have a wife that had previously been married to the offspring of someone from Elimelech, from Elimelech's family. So when Mr. So-and-so died, had he gone through with this transaction, when he passed away, this land that he was redeeming would just revert back over to any children, any boys that he and Ruth would have. And they would take on Mahlon's name. It wouldn't be his name. It wouldn't be Mr. So-and-so's land. It would be, this is the land that belongs to Mahlon's ancestors. The fine print meant that Mr. So-and-so would have to sacrifice something. He would have to give up something to gain in his eyes, very little or even potentially nothing. The gains would be whatever harvest he could collect over the years. You know, I mean, they believed in farming. I can't imagine that Elimelech's land was very far from where Boaz was, right? I mean, they're all in the same family. This is all family lands. He was going to have to give up his own name in this property. He was going to have to take care of Naomi, who was his dead brother's spouse, and now Ruth, who was the widow of his nephew, right? So now he's having to, it's costing him something. He's going to have to feed these people, and then he has to try to give Ruth a child. And if she bears children, then he's got to take care of them. And the more he thought about this, this fine print that Boaz presented to him, he recognized that it required a sacrifice. It required a sacrifice. He was looking at gaining so much. Gaining land, gaining assets, having something, his inheritance that he could pass on. But if he did this, then it would just screw all that stuff up, because it's very likely that he would have to dig into what he already owns. He would have to utilize the resources he already has to take care of all the extra stuff that was coming with this land. And he saw it as a sacrifice. In our ordinary, we're not really interested in sacrificing much in order to gain something. Now, this is a touchy word for us, right? It's one of those that we're like, sacrifice. Ooh. It's like Mufasa. Ooh. Right? You hear sacrifice. Like last week, we talked about waiting, right? We all love to wait. Love it. When it comes to sacrifice, I'm sure that you're all just like, hey, whatever I can do to sacrifice something today, let me know. I'm there. I'm your person. You need me to give up a whole bunch of stuff that I own? Let me know. I'm there, first in line. Nope. Didn't think so. Didn't think so. A sacrifice is one of those, it's a four-letter word to us sometimes, right? It's something that we don't really want to embrace. It's something that is offensive to us. We don't want to have anything to do with it. And once we dig into it, and I put a note there for you to kind of just jot down some words from this definition. But the word sacrifice it means to surrender or give up, or permanent injury or disadvantage to someone. But you give up something for the sake, or you go into something at a disadvantage for the sake of someone or something else. To sacrifice. To sacrifice. You know the situation, you recognize what's going on, and you say, okay, I'm willing to give up something that's precious to me so that someone else can get a foot up, so that someone else can take a step forward, so that someone else can have a need met, so that someone else can reap the benefit of what I'm giving up. Yeah, none of that sounds fun, right? None of it sounds fun. You know, and I'm gonna step on some toes. I'm gonna step on my toes first because I've been wrestling with this week, but I'm stepping on my toes. I'm gonna step on your toes. And I'm going to tell you it's okay because our toes need to get stepped on every now and then. But we are willing to live generous lives out of our excess. Right? I'm willing to sacrifice that 20 when I'm going into the grocery and they're out there ringing the bell because I got enough to go in here and buy groceries for my family. I can drop that in the kettle. I'm going to sacrifice my time. And I'm going to go pull weeds in the neighbor's house because I've got all this extra time and I've already got all my other stuff done, right? It's easy for us to live generously when we're living out of our excess. We already have all we need. Our cup is overflowing. That's not sacrifice. That's just generous living. That is just us being good people. That is just us being nice. And if we're being honest, sacrifice is not in our vocabulary. In our ordinary, Sacrifice is not in our vocabulary. We want to obey God when it benefits us. Mr. So-and-so was ready to benefit. He was ready to step into God's provision, step into God's law, do what was outlined when it was benefiting him. But then he was like, time out. It's going to cost me something. And he was out. We're like that, right? I'm good with following Jesus until he asks me to do something. I'm good with it until he calls me to go somewhere on my own dime into a dangerous part of the country, and into a dangerous part of our community, dangerous part of the world. I'm okay with following Jesus until it hurts. When we get asked to make a sacrifice. I want to be part of his extraordinary until I have to give up something. Until I have to sacrifice. Until I have to die to myself. Until I have to go and wash feet. Or I have to be the... Mr. So-and-so was ready to be part of something extraordinary. He was ready to step in. Until he realized that it was going to cost him something. And again, honestly, what is it really going to cost him? What's it really going to cost him? He was gaining land that he could farm. Surely there were going to be profits off of that would have gone towards taking care of Ruth and any family that they had and all this other stuff. And so, really, what it boils down to is he was willing to step in and do this as long as he was building his own kingdom. As long as he was building his own kingdom, he was ready to jump in. God has made a way for me to build my kingdom. That's what he's thinking. It was about making his own name great. It was about being known in history of his community. It was about people for generations walking by this field and saying, you know what? This is Mr. So-and-so. You didn't even know his name, Mr. So-and-so. Are you kidding me? He gave up the opportunity to be part of something extraordinary, and we don't even know his name. Because he was looking to build his own kingdom instead of being part of what God was doing, the extraordinary thing that God was doing to build his kingdom. In verse 8, and I don't think I put this in your notes, but in verse 8, Mr. So-and-so goes on to tell Boaz to redeem the property himself, and Boaz steps up, and just as he promised Ruth, just as he promised he would do, he committed to it. Picking up at verse 9, which should be in your notes, Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses today, and I am buying from Naomi everything that belonged to Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, to perpetuate the deceased man's name on his property, so that his name will not disappear among his relatives or from the gate of his hometown. You are witnesses today. Boaz knew what was required, and he stepped up. And he made this arrangement in public, and you can go back and you can kind of read through the passages that we're going to skip over today, but you can go back into Deuteronomy and Leviticus and these things, and you can look at the law. And the way this whole transaction was supposed to go down is one man took his sandal off and he handed it to the other man in front of the elders as a witness. And that's how they sealed the deal. That was the signing of the contract. Now, if the person who was the family redeemer bailed on his responsibility, then the widow could come and take that dude's sandal and slap him across the face and spit at him. And it was a public disgracing of the family redeemer. And so, thankfully, Naomi nor Ruth were involved in this conversation. Otherwise, Mr. So-and-so would have not only not had his name continued in history here, but he would also, we probably would have known his name because he'd have been the dude who got slapped in the face and spit on the lady who needed to be redeemed. But anyway, point is, Boaz is here, and he said, you guys, you're witnesses here. He made the transaction legal in front of the elders of the community. He had the witnesses. He accepted the responsibility, and he agreed to make the sacrifice in order to extend salvation for Ruth and Naomi. And this is really just an example. When God's extraordinary, He uses sacrifice to bring salvation. He uses sacrifice to bring salvation. See, we know because of the last few weeks, we know that Boaz was a faithful man of God. He was faithful. He stepped in. He did more than was required by the law to take care of Naomi and Ruth. He actually went above and beyond. He went above and beyond to care for those around him. And we're going to see that this sacrificial act that Boaz is making here is going to extend beyond just Ruth and Naomi. When Boaz agreed to redeem the land and accept Ruth, the locals praised him and blessed him. And again, you can go back and say, they say, hey, we want you to be blessed, and we hope that your household is like that. All these other people that it's like these other great families of our faith that God has used to bring us to this point. Leah and Rebekah are mentioned. Tamar is mentioned in this. We hope that God uses you to do something bigger. We have the example of God doing some great things in our past. And because we know who you are and we've witnessed what you've done here today, we want to encourage you, and we hope that God will use this to be a blessing to you and to us and to generations to come. And after Ruth and Boaz were married, God blessed them with a son, and they named him Obed. And the local women rejoiced with Naomi and encouraged her, reminding her that God brought her back to fullness. You remember at the beginning of the story, Mara, she was bitter because she went away full and she came back empty. She came back empty. And here are these ladies, and I'm sure that several of them who were speaking to her in this exchange were probably some of those where she said, why do you call me Naomi? You call me Mara because my life is bitter. And they're saying, God has filled you back up. God has brought you back to fullness. He's used your daughter-in-law to do something great, something extraordinary. So the community rallied around her and encouraged her with this. God did something extraordinary through ordinary people. Faithful men like Boaz. Women who had faith but had lost it for a minute, who needed some encouragement, who needed some activity. He used an ordinary person like Naomi. He used an ordinary person like Ruth to breathe life back into Naomi. And now I want to draw your attention over to the New Testament. We've been in the Old Testament this whole time, but this is so great. God does extraordinary things, right? So I want to bring you to Matthew chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, which this is, for those of you who are not familiar with Matthew's letter, he opens it up by going through the whole genealogy of Jesus. This is how we get to Jesus. This person had this son, who had this son, who married this person, who had this son. So that's where we're at in this little passage here, this excerpt from Matthew. And it says, Salmon fathered Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz fathered Obed by Ruth, and Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered King David. And you can go back and you can look at that whole passage, and it goes all the way down. It gets to Mary and Joseph. But when you look at that, Mr. So-and-so didn't want to sacrifice something. He didn't want to sacrifice in the moment to be part of God's extraordinary big picture plan. He didn't want to be part of the extraordinary redemption of Ruth and Naomi. Mr. So-and-so was worried about building his own kingdom, and he missed out on advancing God's kingdom. Mr. So-and-so missed out on advancing God's kingdom. But Boaz stepped up, and he counted the cost. He read the fine print. He saw an opportunity to invest in the lives of those around him. He was willing to take on a sacrifice. He was willing to give up something. He was willing to go to the end of the line so that he could provide for somebody else. He knew that God had made provision for his people, and he was a faithful man. And I can just imagine, and we don't have this all laid out, but I can just imagine him thinking about this, going, I know God's got a plan. He's made this plan for redemption. And He's taking care of me, like we made it through the famine. And He's brought Naomi safely back, and Ruth has cared for her, and she's a Moabite woman, but man, she is an outstanding young lady. She is a good moral person. She has great character. He knew these things, and he trusted God with the rest of it. And he says, I will do what I need to do to redeem you, to redeem the land, to step in and be part of your future. His willingness to use his ordinary life in service to the one true God resulted in God doing something extraordinary. See, God not only redeemed Ruth and Naomi, but God used this family to eventually redeem the world through Jesus Christ. The bottom line today is God will use your ordinary sacrifice today as an investment in His extraordinary future. See, Boaz stepped up and he said, I'm willing today to make a sacrifice. I'm willing today to invest my life into these people, to do these things, the things that I know God has made a provision for someone to step up and do. I'm willing in my ordinary circumstance to step into God's extraordinary. And it was an investment into God's extraordinary future. So our bottom line is to think about what your ordinary sacrifice can be today. Don't think about what you're giving up. Don't think about the sacrifice of today. Think about what the future could be because of it. Think about how God can use what you're willing to give up to impact the lives of somebody that you don't even know. Thanks to Boaz making a sacrifice in the short term, because he stepped in because of an ordinary situation, God used that to redeem the entire world. He used that one step to bring Obed into the world. And then Jesse, and then David, and the lineage just continues on going until we get to Mary and Joseph, and here they are, and they bring Jesus into the world. God brings salvation into the world. So the question is, what ordinary things do we need to lay down in our lives? What do we need to lay down? What do we need to sacrifice so that God can do something extraordinary? So He can include us, ordinary people, in His extraordinary kingdom plan. Close your eyes. Let's bow our heads. I want to invite you, if you don't know Jesus today, if you don't know Him as Savior, if you hear all of this talk of redemption, of saving, of God's law, of God's provision, and you're just kind of scratching your head, and you're like, I don't understand it. But I want to know it. I want to understand it. I want to come into a knowledge that I want to comprehend it. I I want to invite you to talk to me today. If today you don't know Jesus as Savior, today might be the day that He's calling you into a relationship with Him. Today, His sacrifice that He's asking you to make is to give up your will in exchange for His will. For you to give up death in exchange for His life. For you to step out of lostness and into His kingdom, into His inheritance, into His family. Maybe you're here today and you've known Jesus, you've been walking with Him for a while, and you're in a great relationship with Him. And maybe He's been putting it on your heart to have a conversation with someone. Maybe your sacrifice today is your pride. Maybe your sacrifice today is your fear. Maybe it's your own strength and your own understanding. Maybe your sacrifice today is just you laying down your life and putting your life in His hands and saying, Jesus, I'm ready. I'm ready to be used by You to extend redemption to a lost person. Jesus, I want to be used by You. I want my ordinary relationships and my ordinary conversations to become extraordinary because they impact the lives of those who are close to me but far from You. Maybe that's your sacrifice today. Maybe it's something bigger. Maybe it's something deeper. Maybe it's something that you've been fighting with God about for a while. And He's telling you, this is what I'm talking about. I want you to give up this thing so I can use you in an extraordinary way. I want to challenge us all today to not be thinking about our own kingdoms, but to be thinking about God's kingdom. About the eternal kingdom. And how we can step into God's extraordinary work in this world to expand His kingdom so that others will be invited into His kingdom.